All right, guys. It looks like we are live. So sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of an issue getting everybody logged on and everything. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to be here. I just want to welcome everybody. My goal with this show is to introduce you to the men who build the world and create lives of impact so that we can celebrate them and work together to fulfill the call of masculinity in our homes, our communities, and the world. Today's guest is a concerned citizen turned one of the most effective grassroots activists in the state of Texas. His brash, bold, and oftentimes abrasive approach to getting things done has gained him immense respect among patriots and fear among professional politicians, especially those with something to hide. He's like a frag grenade to the good old boy business as usual politics, which for the rest of us should hit the spot like an ice cold glass of lemonade on a hot summer day. His love of investigative research led him to uncover one of the largest voter fraud cases Texas has ever seen, gaining him notoriety across the country. Most recently, he's taken his fight to D.C., where he serves as Chief of Staff for newly elected Congressman Lance Gooden. I can't wait to see where it all takes him. Please welcome my friend, Aaron Harris. Aaron, thanks for being here, bro.
Hey, thanks, Corey. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. So for some of the guys that may be tuning in and they're not real political, kind of give them a little bit of a rundown on yourself, because I think the important part to note here is you started out as kind of this guy who, I don't know how involved you were with politics prior to kind of working on some of these local elections, the state rep election for Jonathan Stickland and all of that, but like what got you involved, and then we'll kind of evolve from there.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I watched your last interview you did with the I forget his name, but commercial real estate guy,
Eric Morgan.
Yeah, and that was actually my background. So I worked for a commercial developer through my 20s. Then went out and was doing real estate investing on my own. And the nice thing about real estate investing is it allows you a very flexible schedule.
Yeah.
And I became just a political activist. Just started doing stuff in politics and really loved it. So much so that I was just spending a lot of time at it.
Yeah.
It was something, we all have those things that take away from our revenue generating thing we do for a living. And my wife and I were on vacation back in 2013. We were driving and we were just kind of talking about life and what we were going to do next and all that. And I said, I'm spending 20, 30 hours a week on this political stuff.
Yeah.
I need to figure out a way to get paid for it, or I just need to cut it out and, put those extra 20 hours into real estate every week.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I started praying about it. We didn't really tell anybody. We just kind of started praying about how we could figure out a way for me to split my time between real estate and politics, which are two things I love. If you ever want to give me talk, and I'll talk about either one of those two subjects all night. And so 2.5 weeks later, as you mentioned, Jonathan Stickland called me and said, "Hey, man, would you consider running my campaign, my reelection campaign?" And at that point, I'd run a couple local campaigns as an activist and done a couple things, but nothing that was paid. And he said, "Would you consider running my race?" And oh, by the way, it's a paid position. And he had no idea that my wife and I had been praying about that for about 2.5 weeks. And so we chatted about it, and then he interviewed a couple other folks. He called me about 2-3 weeks later, and he said, "Let's do it." So that was my first kind of paid venture into politics, and then it just kind of the ball just rolled from there. And shortly after that, in 2014, I founded Direct Action Texas, and we started doing a number of different things, but mostly trying to influence and affect local elections. And it was in one of these local elections that we ran that we ended up losing. And that particular race, we were very well funded, and we had all the resources you need as far as analytics, in this case particularly. And we knew exactly kind of where the numbers were, and we knew that this was going to be a 51-49 race, and it could have gone either way. Well, on election night, we got blown out of the water.
Really?
And so, oh yeah, we lost our shirts. And so I had a gentleman say, "Figure out how we lost." And I said, "I was going to take some resources." And he said, "Well, okay, I'll give you the resources." So I spent about 1.5 years uncovering voter fraud and what a thing called vote harvesting, which I knew nothing about at the time.
Yeah.
And since then, Direct Action Texas has had complaints that have led into criminal investigations and prosecutions in 7 different counties across Texas. I found myself going to places as far as North Carolina, where right now there's a really high-profile case in North Carolina where a Republican has not been seated in the U.S. Congress, Robert Harris, because he hired a harvester in his race. and they have basically refused to seat him, and they're going to be calling a special election, North Carolina 9th district out there.
Wow.
So it's kind of taken a turn where I went from kind of a campaign guy to all of a sudden this voter fraud guy. But in investigating voter fraud, I found that I really enjoyed and was kind of good at investigative stuff, undercover stuff. And so that led me to do a number of different investigations. The ones that people that publicly know are voter fraud. So we have New Essex County and Tarrant County and Harrison County and Gregg County and Kaufman County. Go down the list. There's just we have a ton of them. But then I've also done opposition research, which is honestly kind of what I found that I really love. It's a passion. It's just a few things are a bigger high than having a good successful field operation oppo research. And so you and I were talking about that the other day, and kind of get into that. Now I find myself up on Capitol Hill, Chief of Staff. As a Chief of Staff, you have to behave. You can't be going out and throwing bombs and doing opposition research. So,
is that working against your nature?
It is, but I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. There's also, that same skill set you use in investigative reporting and in opposition research to try to get people to talk to you. Those interpersonal skills are the same interpersonal skills you need on the Hill. So it works well, whether you're talking to another congressman's chief of staff and wanting to collaborate on something, or whether you're talking to a constituent or an industry group. You need those interpersonal skills. No more so than when you have somebody in your office, say, with an organization that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm confronted, in a congressional office, we get 30 to 50 requests every single day for meetings. Okay. Obviously you cannot take that many meetings. We do take a lot of meetings, and it's very common for me to have somebody in my office asking us to support them on a bill that I just simply don't agree with for any number of reasons. But yet they may be a constituent of ours, and so you have to have those interpersonal skills to walk that conversation in a way that's not confrontational and doesn't backfire on the member, right? So those interpersonal skills, once you have them, can relate to anything. It's, once I heard somebody say everything in life is sales, right? And the most important skill set you can learn in life is to be a salesman. You're always selling something, right? Corey, you're selling wisdom and grit and all the things that you're doing with personal development. The gentleman you had on before, he's selling commercial real estate. Everybody's selling something,
right?
Either a service or a product, right? Once you learn those interpersonal sales skills, you can use them anywhere.
That's good. So whenever you talk about interpersonal skills, and I didn't intend for it to go this way, but I think this is an important thing, because you're definitely one. Out of a lot of people that I know, you have the gift of being able to extract information and get in there and keep the conversation going. You're interesting to talk to, you're engaging, but you're also like bold as a lion. So there's a lot of those things that kind of fall into that. But if you were to define interpersonal skills, like which particular skill sets would you say are involved in that?
That's a good question. I would say it's a chain of things that are all interlinked, right? But I think first and foremost is you have to have the ability to read people, right? So whether you're selling Lexuses over in Grapevine, or you're running a campaign where you're trying to get when you're running a political campaign, what's your product? It's your candidate, right?
Yeah.
And sell that candidate to the voter. So whether you're selling a candidate to a voter, or whether you're selling a Lexus, or whether you're selling coaching classes, you have to read people and understand where they're at in life and understand what their currency is. A lot of times when I say to people, figure out what Corey's currency is, figure out what Susie's currency is, or Sally's currency is.
Yeah.
In politics in particular, everybody, if I use the word figure out what their currency is in politics, they assume that's like corruption. Let's just, put $100,000 in tinfoil in their freezer like that guy in Louisiana. Most people's currency is not cash, right?
Right.
And people
have that conversation.
Always think about that, right? A lot of people's currency is the need to get credit. Okay?
Yeah.
Egos, right? So they don't really care if the idea was theirs or not. They just want everybody to think it was theirs. And so I'm happy to work with those people, because they'll typically go along with what I'm wanting to do. I just have to tell people that they're the one that came up with the idea. I'm great with that. If that person brings me benefit, right, to the project. Like if we're trying to get a coalition, you have a coalition leader who all he wants is credit, give him the credit. Other people want to know that they were involved in the decision making and that they actually had a say. Other people simply want access. You just have to figure out what people's currency is. And I think that's the same, like I said, if let's say you're selling a car or selling coaching classes, right? Is what's the value to that person? It's not the same to everyone. You have to figure out what their currency is. And then you got to figure out how to leverage that currency to close the deal. And so, you and I have talked about opposition research. When you go and you're doing field work, so I specifically do field work opposition research. So somebody builds the file and they give you
real quick, explain that to like the people that don't know what that is. I mean, it's kind of straightforward, but it's an interesting thing because when we talked about this, it was your going away party. You were heading to DC like that next week or whatever, and you were kind of telling me about it. And I've been involved in politics. We've been a lot of the same circles and stuff for a long time, and I didn't even realize the complexity or how deep that actually went. But and some of the stuff you were telling me, and I don't know what we can talk about, so I'll let you kind of take the lead there. But as far as like how much power a person in that position actually has, and the game that's being played in a political spectrum is really this is the foundational aspect of that, is this oppositional research, right?
Yes and no. I mean, so opposition research, first off, doesn't happen as often as people think it does. What I mean by that, it's not cheap. Okay, opposition research is expensive. So when you're talking about a city council race or a low dollar state house race, you're probably not going to see a lot of that because, let me be clear, opposition research isn't having some 20-year-old spend 20 hours on Googling everything about Corey Huddleston. Like that's not opposition research. Okay. So opposition research is first and foremost not cheap. Therefore, by definition, it's not a lot of races that do it.
Right.
Definitely, thankfully, even given the depravity of mankind, the majority of the time when you dig into somebody, you just don't find things that are ballot movers. Meaning, so let me tell you how the process works. You say, okay, Corey Huddleston's running against my friend or whoever I'm trying to support. And so we want to do opposition research on Corey and see what we can find. And so you'll hire your oppo guy to do what we call build the file. And that's typically going to be 150 to 200 pages of everything about Corey. So it's going to have all your demographics, date of birth, where you live, every address you've ever had, every marriage you've ever had, every kid you have, what your kids are doing, who they're married to, where you went to high school, what teams you play on, everything, to every political contribution you've ever made, anytime you've been late on your taxes. I mean, you name it, it's in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Every lawsuit, every lien, every mortgage and loan you've ever taken out. Now, you then take that file and you identify things that are actionable, or you look at it and you go, there's nothing in this that's actionable. And then you just stop spending money. Now, what makes something actionable? What makes something actionable is not only was it, say, bad, but it also has to be a ballot mover.
Gotcha.
So if it comes back and like Corey smoked a lot of weed in college, that's not actionable because voters don't care about weed. It's not a ballot mover. Yeah. Okay. So you once you find, sometimes you have a file come back and there's 2 or 3 things on there that are really actionable, but they're going to require, now that your researcher built the file, somebody's got to go in the field, knock on doors, talk to people, and get recordings, statements, documentation, etc., of the actionable item. Yeah. And that's where I come in. So somebody builds the file, you get 1 or 2 or 3 actionable items in that file, and you now have to go. A classic example everybody knows nationally was, that Judge Moore out in Alabama ran for Senate, and he had all these girls that he dated that were underage, right? So somebody went and interviewed those girls at their houses, right? They found those girls, they interviewed those girls, etc. I actually got asked to go help on that project and was unavailable, but it would have been a great one. But I do know the guys that went and did that. And so the story I was telling you, I'll go ahead and tell it on publicly. But we had a situation where a gentleman down in Houston in the Baytown area filed to run for state rep. This guy was a sitting city council member and filed to run against a friend of mine. And so we did a little digging, and we found that he had an extensive Ashley Madison account. So for those of you that don't know, hopefully your listeners don't know what Ashley Madison is. I didn't know until this file. Ashley Madison is a website that encourages men to have affairs and cheat on their wives, and it connects men with women on the internet for that reason. So this particular gentleman had an Ashley Madison account. We were able to get his full account, including his profile, but also the entries, the things he has typed on that website to these women, along with his every time you log into these websites, guys, you're leaving a timestamp of when you logged in, but also there's a geolocation, so we know exactly where you logged in from. And we were able to get all that. And so I created a mock flyer, and it had his picture and it had the Ashley Madison account logo on it. And this was right when all the Weinstein stuff was going on. And
wow.
Congressman Joe Barton, if you remember, he got in trouble for sending inappropriate pictures to this. So we put Weinstein, we had a little photograph of Weinstein and everything. So meanwhile, we worked on this for several months. Meanwhile, we fished him on Facebook with a fake profile of a middle-aged female who was a voter in his district, and she engaged him back and forth on politics. And he was going back and forth with her for months. And
you say she, but it was you, right?
Right.
Or somebody.
And so at one point, so the Ashley Madison accounts are tied to an email address. So instead of saying Corey Huddleston, it would be like, ch124@yahoo.com. Well, I got to know that ch124@yahoo.com is actually Corey, right? So she private messages him on Facebook and said her and her husband sent him a bunch of questions about the race. And did you get them? Because we didn't hear a response. He says, I didn't get them. So I sent them to, this email address. In this case, it was Texas_safety@yahoo.com. And he says, oh, no, I don't have that email address anymore. Send it to this one. And so she responds and says, what happened? Did you lose the password to that account? I've done that before. And he actually typed back, Corey, I kid you not. He actually typed back and says, yeah, at least that's what I told my wife.
Oh, okay, my gosh.
To a perfect stranger who he's never met. And so we included that text in this mailer. So I create this mailer, and I waited. We wanted to explain to him why he shouldn't run for office. Okay,
right? Because you can't blatantly tell him,
for
right?
2 or 3 months, and the filing deadline was coming up. Alasha, you there?
Yeah, you there? Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Corey,
hold on. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, you're back. Yeah, you're back.
If just to give you a heads up, this platform does that sometimes. But if that ends up happening again, I can literally hear and see you. So for whatever reason, it just does that. So I don't know.
You're still bringing up on me.
Hold on, just a second. I'm gonna text him. You there?
Yep.
All right. So I was just telling you, sorry about that, but sometimes this platform does that, and I don't know what does that, but I can hear and see you.
Oh, okay. So
for some reason, so just keep going. Yeah.
So I went down and approached this gentleman or this person a week before the filing deadline, and called him up and asked him to meet. And he was under the understanding that I had opposition research on his opponent. Never said that, but kind of implied it. And he got all excited and said, "You're just going to give me this information?" I said, "Yep, I'm just going to give you this information." So we went and sat down, and late at night, it was about 9:30 at night, and we chatted for a minute, and then I handed him this flyer that was made like a mailer that had all of his Ashley Madison information on it. And it was pretty good, I gotta say. And he went into like this trance, man, just
wow.
And he would just rub the piece of paper back and forth, back and forth. And he was rubbing it. It was almost like he was trying to figure out if it was real, right?
That's crazy.
Immediately he got defensive and said, "Man, somebody spent a lot of money putting this together. Who do you work for?" Those types of things. And I said, none of that matters. And I told him, I said, there's two types of men that run for office with this in their background. One is the type of guy who wants the office so much he doesn't care about the pain he's about to cause his wife and his daughter. And the other is the man who doesn't understand the pain that he's about to cause his wife, his daughter, his church, his family. I told him, I said, I think you're the second kind. I think you don't understand what's about to happen. And I said, let me guarantee you that if I have this, other people have this. And by running for this office, you're about to cause your daughter and your wife a lot of pain. And you should probably reconsider your decision. And, he looked at me and said, what do you want me to do? Drop out of the race? I said, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Because coercion against candidacy is a misdemeanor in Texas. But I'm not here to tell you what to do. I said, I would tell you should go home, talk to your wife, talk to your pastor, and reconsider your choices. And so that was on Monday night. And on Thursday, we got word that he had dropped out of the race. So,
Wow.
So the current state rep there ran unopposed in the primary. And honestly, we probably saved a good, $500,000 on that race. So
Wow.
That's how I it. It was well worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure, I guess, or I don't know how you would say it, of doing that 7 times. I've gotten 7 people to drop out of races. And so it's been one of the funnest things I do, honestly. I tell that story because I'm kind of whatever, but most of them, of course, you can't really ever tell publicly.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you telling that because I remember you telling me that, and I was completely dumbfounded the entire time you were telling me. I mean, just all in, and it almost seems unreal, like to kind of think that this is what's going on, but it's not. And the real reason that I want guys to truly understand this is whether or not they're interested in politics or not. What you do matters at any point in your life. And the things that we do in our lives, if we're truly the men of legacy that we want to be, is every little thing we think is going unseen and that people aren't going to be affected by our decisions. But that's what we think in that time. And then these things that come to play, right, that are literally have the potential to ruin our entire lives.
Character matters, man. Character matters. And, the only reason this stuff works is because it's true. And some of these people, they think they can outrun this, but you can't. Character matters, to your point. Like, you'll do these things in your youth, or in this guy's case, in his later years, it will come back to bite you, right? Like, and the Bible says a lot about that, right? And so you got to take that stuff to heart.
So whenever you're doing all this stuff, I'm sure that you've come across instances where the result is you are getting attacked probably back to some degree, or there's some degree of fear involved with what the repercussion is of going head to head with these people. Have you encountered a lot of that, or am I just kind of thinking outside the box there?
A little bit, like, especially mostly on the voter fraud stuff. So we've had a couple instances. There was, had to have my family evacuated and whatnot a couple times, and there's been a couple instances where law enforcement's come and given me some briefings and gone over some security and safety things. But it just it's part of the job, I guess. I find that people that operate in the shadows for a reason, and that they're more scared of sunlight than you are of them, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't really take it all that seriously, because I just don't think they have the gumption to come out to the sunlight where I'm at.
Yeah.
You want to play ball? Great, but you have to come on my court, and I'm out here where the sun's shining.
Yeah.
And they just won't do it, right? And so I've never been that worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a excellent point. I do see, though, how like somebody in a truly desperate situation would be, in the potential to do something that's not there. I'm not definitely not.
I don't know if you remember last year with Russ Casey. So we had a judge here in Tarrant County, Judge Russ Casey, who myself and a couple of folks at Direct Action Texas, my organization, we exposed that he was on the ballot fraudulently. He had forged the signatures for his judicial application. So we went out and did that and submitted it. Well, long story short, he ended up getting prosecuted and pled guilty to a couple felonies. So not only is he no longer a judge, but he can't even vote any longer because he's a felon. Okay. And he went on suicide watch, and he ended up threatening to kill myself and several other people. And that was one of those situations where it's a fine line between somebody who's desperate and somebody who's a killer. You know, it's a very fine line. And so that was one of those moments where, just because of his state of mind, you had to be concerned because he was losing everything, right? He lost his judgeship and all he ever knew. You know, marital strife over it. He became a felon, all that stuff. So somebody in that kind of situation, you don't fear them because they're strong and powerful. You fear them because they're mentally unstable, right? Yeah. And so, we've had some moments like that as well.
That's crazy, dude. No, I mean, it's I think that's the realistic aspect of what you're doing. And as you're now in the federal level, I know you've expressed some desire to want to do that at higher levels, like on the federal side of it, but there's more to lose, it seems, for some of those people. So it seems like the danger is even more real.
Yeah. You know, so to that point, I'm currently chief of staff, and you can't do any of that when you're chief of staff. But long term, I would like to continue doing oppo research after my stint as chief of staff, however long that is. And you're right, like there is more to lose. But you know, it's those types of good oppo research jobs, field jobs, don't come along very often.
Yeah.
And so you have to, but if you can play on a national level and be willing to travel and do those projects, you can get them. I find it's a very worthwhile thing, though. I think it's a good project because we complain about the character of our politicians.
Yeah.
But if we can flush these guys out before they get in office, you know, people say that politics corrupts these guys. I disagree. I think politics highlights and magnifies your character.
That's good, dude. So
the character's already there. The character flaws are already there. Sometimes you and your loved ones don't even know the character flaws are there because you haven't been tested on that, right? We saw that with Joseph, right? Look at what Joseph went through from being in the well, in the pit of a well, all the way to being the ruler of Egypt, and all the tests that he endured and encountered over a period of years. Some of those tests that he encountered later on would have been weren't even things he could be tested on at the beginning of his journey, right? And so I think what you see is guys that get into office that we later complain about their character and their corruption. Those character flaws were there. They just haven't been flushed out. And so when you can do opposition research and flush these guys out ahead of time, I find it to be an invaluable service because you're flushing out these men of lesser character ahead of time and hopefully increasing the character of those left in the pool.
Yeah. I mean, percentage-wise, how many people would you say, or obviously you don't have a good, strong number on this, but being in the environment that you are, I mean, percentage-wise, what are we looking at from the types of people who actually have great character versus those who don't, would you say?
Oh, man, that is now you're putting me on the spot because I work in this environment. You know, I'll say this. I'm gonna answer that in two ways. First off, it is surprising to people on the outside who are cynical and fed up with politics.
Yeah.
I would say to you, you'd be surprised how many good people there are.
Yeah. I agree.
However, I will also say that this is a truism. People of high character, the people that are part of your group here, Corey, wisdom and grit, okay, they're going to obtain a position in life because of their character, because of their work ethic. They're going to have influence. The people that are on your wisdom and grit are influencers, not because of their positions in life, but because of their character and their leadership. They obtain that naturally through regular human behavior and interactions, and people go, that's somebody I want to follow.
Yeah.
But let's say that you're somebody of low character, of low work ethic, and yet you strive to have influence and power. The only place you can get that is to go run for office and get one more vote than the other guy. And now you're the honorable Corey Huddleston, regardless of your character. See, in the free market, in the world and out there in relationships, you obtain influence through your character and your work ethic.
Yeah.
In politics, you obtain it by getting one more vote than the other guy.
That's crazy.
And so it attracts people who want that influence and power, who otherwise can't obtain it. A lot of your guys that are listening to this podcast or members of your group would never consider running for office because they're too busy growing their commercial real estate or their, a marketing company or whatever they're doing. And because of that, they never run for office.
Yeah.
And so I would say there is an element of elected official who is a result of needing and wanting that power and influence, but nobody in their life will give it to them, so they obtain it through politics.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's great. I mean, it absolutely makes a ton of sense. And I think that, I being as involved in politics as I am, and not even close to where you're at, but like, I know that whenever I run across guys who don't even want to have conversations about it, that are otherwise, relatively moral men or whatever else, but they have this idea of what politics is. And to them, it's just the gutter. And my thinking has always been more in line with, it might be the gutter, but you've been equipped with armor and character and all these things, as you're saying. So get your butt in there and go to battle, as much as you can. I mean, I understand not being able to. I can't do 30 to 40 hours a week like you did starting out. There's got too much going on, But, and even inside of that, would I want to? I don't even know, But I mean, the other side of that, though, is every little bit helps. And all of these uninformed voters and people that are getting involved in politics in any capacity that are speaking with such certainty, but they know absolutely nothing about the true state of the political spectrum is maddening. And I don't even know if there's really a solution to that outside of, man, you just got to do the hard work. Because I think back to when I started getting involved in politics, and it was around the time, Jonathan Stickland had just taken on his first, when he first started to run and all that. That was about when I started going and getting involved. And so we've been involved in it probably about as long as each other, but you just went all the way into it. And making the decision to be at the meetings that nobody else goes to, and to, go and be a part and volunteer your time to things that people don't, it's right. Spend time with your kids and do this. Me, I justified it by saying, if I don't do this, my kids and I won't ever be able to, I'll have to tell them stories about freedom rather than show them it, Right. And so that was just my drive. And so kind of from that perspective, I mean, how would you speak to these men that they have moral character? Maybe they did some stuff wrong in high school or college or whatever else, but they've moved beyond that and they know that they've been forgiven or whatever else, but that now they try to push politics away, thinking that it has nothing to do with where they are in life.
Well, I think the first saying I'll say to respond to that is, you might not care about politics, but politics cares about you.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's something we always say within political circles about people who are, just try to ignore politics. You can't ignore it. It's in everything you do.
Yeah.
It's whether you want to or not. I mean, look, Matt, you posted the other day about Matt Krause posting the lemonade. I mean, we're at a place in our society where we have to pass a bill to legalize kids having a lemonade stand.
That's insane. Yeah.
The amount of things that government does that affect your life now, it both personally in your privacy, in your business, in your look, the affronts on our religious freedoms now, where you have bakers being forced to bake cakes for people who they don't morally agree with the lifestyle. You have a situation in this country where you no longer afford to sit back and ignore it. The only question becomes, what's your role, right? And so you mentioned you and I both got started, give or take the same time. We took different paths. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
There's many members but one body. And I think we just have to figure out for each of us what's our calling to do in that. I have a gentleman who I go to often to help fund some of these projects, right? And he knows, and he says, look, you do politics, I run a business. My job is to write checks for you guys. I run my business and I help fund projects, both religious and political. And so that's his role, and he's okay with that. He's an influencer. He calls me. As a matter of fact, I was talking to him yesterday about some legislation we're working on, and he loved it, and he started sending me some ideas for input on the legislation, right? So he has influence, but his role is to write checks, and he knows that. He accepts it. Other people's role is to push the window, right? The groups like NETDP and others that you're affiliated with, it's to help push those elected officials and hold them accountable. So everybody has a role. What I would say is figure out what your role is and do it. Don't sit back. And I'm gonna take us back a second if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
We're talking about character. You posted something, and I'm reading all your posts, man. You posted the other day that, I think it was today or yesterday, about masculinity and like which historical figure, which person represents manhood the most to you. And I'm going to share with you guys something. If you something that I can tell you firsthand is the problem with politics, and it's not what anybody thinks it is. Everybody thinks the problem with DC or Austin is that they're corrupt, that they're on the take, or some version of that, right?
Yeah.
The reality is completely opposite. The problem with politics is we have weak men. What do I mean by that specifically? The hardest thing, you know what the hardest thing, Corey, for an elected official to do is?
Say no.
Exactly. Okay. Every time you say no to somebody, not only are you saying yes to somebody else, but mostly you're giving them a reason to oppose you and to cause you a headache. Okay. So let's take this. By the way, this works both ways. Okay?
Yeah.
You and I are conservatives. So if we walk in a state rep's office and we say, we want you to support this conservative cause, and they say no to you and I, what are we going to do? We're going to
get after them. Yeah.
We're going to make their life a headache, right? Yeah. But so does everybody else. So if you and I go in there and we say, we want you to support gun rights, and the next guy that walks in says, we want you to oppose gun rights.
Yeah.
What's he going to do? Because he's going to have to say no to one of us, or he can say yes to both of us and we walk out, which also happens. But here's my point. I sit there in DC, and every day, we are starting this week appropriation season, appropriating money, okay? From now to the end of July, we will pass 12 big appropriation bills. And you have people coming out of the woodwork asking for money. A lot of it is just renewal of money they already get, or renewal and increase, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of them are causes that you and I would probably sit down and go, oh, I agree with that one. But nonetheless, that cause is still adding to our deficit.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm sitting in D.C., and I'm a congressman, let's say, and you walk into my office and you say, I want you to reappropriate. We have this program for childhood cancer research, okay? And it's, $45 billion a year, whatever. And we don't do millions in D.C. anymore. Everything's billions. And so, it's so much X amount of dollars. If I say no to you, I now have a bunch of angry moms and dads in my district working against me.
Yeah.
If I say yes to you, we appropriate $45 billion to your program, but what's the skin off my back? We gave you $45 billion last year, and it's not my money, okay? Yeah. So there's no downside to the politician to say yes. There's a huge downside for him to say no.
Right.
Okay? So this is why I go back to, we need men with the character to say no, because it's not easy. And by the way, some of those people are going to say no to are our friends.
Yeah.
I've thought about starting to make a list of all the people who come in my door and ask me for federal money who are quote unquote conservatives or conservative aligned organizations who will turn around and go home and complain about the deficit. Okay.
That's
you
crazy.
Just my office and ask me for money.
Yeah.
But we justify it because it's for this or it's for that. Okay. But we're all adding to the problem. And the reality is the problem with politics, to summarize, is the inability to say no. But you have to understand there's a very real reason for it, because you and I will hammer them if they say no to us. We're part of the problem on one hand, and we're part of the solution on the other hand.
What is the solution when you say that? I mean, because I feel like a lot of it might be like, look, I think the bigger issue inside of what you're saying is identity, right? Where are these people getting their level of who am I, right? You and I would both say God defines who I am, right? But for the people that aren't Christian or that don't even know, like they are literally finding their identity in who they are, the honorable whatever, like so. And if their whole identity is found in that, anything that threatens that is going to be something that they don't want to do. But if they know that who they are in God and who He's created them to be, saying no is easy because it's a matter of doing the right thing versus doing the right thing for me.
Right. Well, so I'm going to answer your question. What's the solution? I'm going to give you both a political and a spiritual answer.
Okay.
So politically, there's a saying that says politics goes to those who show up. Okay. The problem we have is conservatives don't show up at the polls. They just don't. Okay. We know on every measure that we outnumber liberals. The problem is we're too busy running our kids to Little League and all that stuff, and we just don't show up. So the first answer to your political answer is show up. We outnumber them. We just choose not to show up.
You're saying it just in the voting realm, not even any other way.
Well, in the voting realm, in the political pressure realm, okay? I mean,
okay.
We have groups. A classic example of that is vast majority of Americans are against homosexual marriage. It failed the 2 or 3 times been put on the ballot. In California, it fails. Homosexuals represent about 2% of the population, but they show up. They show up. Where are we at in that argument? We don't even show up, okay? So whether it be the political discussion or it be the actual polls, ultimately the actual polls are what matters. And it goes to those who show up. We saw that in November here in Texas. We lost seats we shouldn't have lost to Democrats. And I've looked at the data on who the voters were. And we had Republicans slip over, but mostly we just didn't show up the way they did. So that's the political answer. But now I'm going to give you kind of more of a spiritual answer, which is one of the problems we have. The reason we have Medicaid and welfare and food stamps, et cetera, is because the church has stopped doing what we've been commanded to do, which is take care of the widows and the orphans and take care of the poor. Okay. Right. The reason that the government has had a excuse to grow the way it has is because we have relegated those responsibilities away from us spending our evenings and weekends and time helping those in our community. And we've said, you know what, let's just ask the government to do it instead. And until we as Christians take back that authority, which means sacrificially giving of our time and money to do so, until we fill those gaps, government is going to be the religion of the secularists and the solution for them to do these things. Because we as church have not stepped up and done what we commanded to do, then therefore the government has filled the void of the church. And you see this in so many areas. And so I believe that's the first step. If you want to reduce the size of government, then who's going to play the role of what the government's doing? Well, the answer to that is the church. The answer to that is church is supposed to be doing it all along. I go to a church there in Keller. We do a ton of stuff for single moms. Single moms are the widows of today, right? And I love that. We do a ton of community service. We do outreach to refugees. Okay, there's a big refugee population down in Southwest Fort Worth. We go down there every week, and every month we do a big thing down there. And so, we're serving the community. We go out twice a year and clear every code violation the city of Keller has. We get code violation from City of Keller. We clear them all on one Saturday. Awesome. Anyhow, I think that when the church steps back up to the place of influence that it should have, then you can start to reduce the need and size of government.
That's such an important aspect because you hear these conversations taking place, and I've actually become way more willing to have conversations with people that think differently than I do. I mean, it can be tough, but I also recognize that was probably more of a smallness inside of me, right? So I purposely am seeking out people that oppose nearly everything the way that I think, and I'm finding that there's a lot more in common in the way that we think when we build relationship. But you have to build the relationship, because it's bantering back and forth over social media or anything else is really a fool's errand. I mean, the reality that you're ever going to find a solution with someone that's not right in front of you and you're exchanging humanity, if you will, is pretty narrow. But to kind of hear what you're talking about and like government being the religion and churches rising up. And I think that's such a huge part. And I want men to understand that are listening right now is that church, as the Bible describes it, and I'm not taking away from the actual church buildings and those types of things, but that could literally be this, or wisdom and grit, or you and another man, or you and your family, or whatever else, going out and just living with who you are, or as far as who God's created you to be. So like a couple of weekends ago, a few of us from inside the group went out and bought a bunch of cheeseburgers and stuff, and we're walking around handing out Cokes and cheeseburgers and waters to homeless people in Fort Worth. Just because, and it's like good to go out and serve people who can do nothing for you. But if we always thought like that in everything that we're doing, then we're going to see, I think, a lot less power in DC, like you're saying, in the state and all that kind of stuff, and start seeing more power in the hands of the people. So I'm right on with you, man.
Right. You kind of look at it. You look at it and you go, okay, identify a problem. You go, is that a legitimate problem? That's a legitimate problem.
Yeah.
Then the next question is, whose role is it to fix that problem? So if you and I were to sit here and come up with all these different problems that our society has, and we would say, okay, but who has the proper role of fixing it? A secularist would answer government in almost every single one. And you and I would sit here and go, no, that's us as individuals, as neighbors, Christians, as church. Okay. And that's where we've really been led astray. And then you go to the politician, you ask them for it, and they can't say no. So, there you go. We lose that argument because we haven't stepped up to the plate. We just haven't.
Yeah. And that's super interesting that, because I remember the first time, and this was about that same time when I first started getting involved in politics. My son had just been born, and I just started my company. Like I was super nervous about that because you're launching out on an entrepreneurial endeavor, and you know how that feels, man. You're like, okay, it's real now,
No,
but I remember, what's that?
No paycheck on Friday.
All right.
You gotta earn that, baby.
So I'm walking, and I remember because I walk my dog all the time. I used to get all these visions and stuff, but I was like, it just hit me all of a sudden. I was like, oh, I'm the generation now that everything falls. I just like, before I kind of always saw that generation a couple years or a few ahead of us, as being the decision makers and kind of the builders, if you will.
Right.
And it just all of a sudden hit me. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm that guy now for those generations, And so getting that level of responsibility put on you, and I think that's the big thing, is most people don't have enough self-esteem, right, to admit, like, dude, this is our problem, and so it's easier to throw it on somebody else and pretend like we don't have the power and we're the victim, because it's easier if something doesn't go right, then we can blame them instead of taking responsibility for where that's going. And that's such a huge aspect of taking life to the next level as a man, as an influencer, as somebody who's got the ability to create impact. But also it's the simple answer to stuff like what you're talking about in the political realm, in abortion, or any of the things that really matter to our culture today. Right. Taking personal responsibility.
Well, and I'm gonna mix the two. So when you listen to, like, one of the things that's been interesting about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, I was just about to bring her up, so I'm glad you did that.
If you listen to her, she doesn't make fiscal or policy arguments about why she wants to do all these things. She makes moral arguments.
Yeah.
Right? We morally have to take care of this problem. We morally have, but who's the we? So she says, we morally have to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And so in her conversation, in her mind, in her world, we is the government.
Yeah.
Your world and my world, we as us as men in the church.
Yeah.
And therein lies the problem. But they can tax you and I and get the government to go do it. Whereas we, the church, we Christians, haven't stepped up to the plate.
Right.
We've left this void and they're filling it for us. And we're upset about it, but yet we're not addressing the void. So
I know we just kind of answered that, but I guess it's just a matter of the personal responsibility thing. Because I feel like, I'm a solution finder. I know you are too. And it's like, man, sitting there trying to think about how do we change the course of that? Because we're in so deep now, it seems. And as you know, the 2020 election, everybody's entering in on the Democrat side, and we're seeing all these socialist, ideals and stuff starting to rise to the top. And the young people are all about it. and we all know that just that next generation, I mean, if we don't do something now, and if we can even at this point, and I'm not a defeatist or anything, I'm not sitting there thinking we've lost already by any means,
Right.
but it's like, are we making, because I hear people make the argument all the time, oh, conservatives are going to be a distant thing. Like here, they may win one more election, but after that, like there will never be another conservative politician that will be a president or anything like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's what everybody said about Hillary, after that race too. So, I mean, all these people with their certainty and all this kind of stuff, it makes it hard for people who aren't really involved in politics to feel like, oh, I guess we're never going to win anyway. So what's the point, or what difference am I going to make? And I've heard people say that. What difference does my voice make? What difference does my single little vote make?
Right. Well, again, I'll go back to my saying, politics goes to those who show up.
Yeah.
And the reality is you have to. But let me address the bigger question of, the defeatist mindset that, well, there's nothing we can do, we're going down. I don't share that mindset. First off, political pendulums swing. They just do.
Yeah.
The Democrats are having their Tea Party movement. We had ours in 2010 and 12. By the way, the other thing that's interesting is if you look at historically, after you have a big economic crash, okay, like what we had in 2008.
Yeah.
But post-economic crashes, typically about 5 to 8 years after an economic crash, you have extreme political polarization. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. We had this massive crash that lasted from 2008 through about 2011. And here we are in 2018, and we have this massive political chasm, right?
Yeah.
Where we're just so polar. You saw the same thing in Germany, for example. Germany had a massive economic issues. One thing that's really interesting about Germany is in 1931, there was this big regional bank that went bankrupt, and everybody lost their savings and all their money.
Wow.
The interesting thing is that bank was owned by Jews.
Wow.
And what you see is 5-6 years later, this huge rise in anti-Semitism. Okay. So economic collapse results in polarization, political polarization. We see this over and over throughout world history. Okay. So we're following a pattern that's pretty predictable, if you will. But also, let me go back to the main issue is how do we get the church to step back up? How do we get the church to fill these voids? Unfortunately, Corey, I just don't see the church mobilizing or behavior changing too much. We have 4% unemployment, 2% inflation, salaries or wages are rising. Those types of systematic reforms or really those types of revivals within the church only happen in moments of civil and societal unrest.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I don't personally believe that the church is going to step up to the plate like it should in the absence of some massive societal issue.
That makes a ton of sense. So what would be the game plan for the churches? Because I think a lot of that too is, the types of people that go and start churches a lot of times, it sounds like you go to a really great church. I go to Gateway. It's good. They're involved in a lot of the different things around. So, but there's hundreds of churches, at least here in just Dallas, Fort Worth alone, if not thousands, and knowing the mind of people sometimes who go out and start churches, we want to believe that they're always great, but sometimes it's just a guy who's like, oh, I feel like God's showing me to do this, and it's more ego driven than it is spirit driven, because somebody wants their name on a church, Sunday flyer bulletin, and so we see, I think that's a bigger part of it, right? Is kind of the heart behind some of the church leadership a lot of times. Right. And that's the same scenario, right? How many people go to church that don't even read the scriptures for themselves and don't recognize that, hey, this is part of it, but how I lead my family here and whether we're leading the scripture and how we live our lives is all, like, it's personal responsibility still inside of that. But if we were able to get churches all on board and all that, like, who would lead that movement, right?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I don't know, because one of the things you run into with pastors too is they're hesitant to work with others a lot of times, right, outside of their association or organization. But I'll say this. I mean, so you mentioned Gateway. I go to Milestone. Milestone. We're over in Keller. We've got 7,000 or 8,000 people on a weekend. What Gateway has, I don't know, 20,000, whatever it is. You have Fellowship Church up the road, 15,000. You have Northwood Church, 5,000. I mean, you got all these. First Baptist Grapevine. In a very small area, you have all these big mega churches.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Does Keller, South Lake, Northeast Tarrant County area have a lower divorce rate?
No.
Does it have, does it have a lower crime rate? Does it have, I mean, are we really impacting the communities? What can we show for as a church that we've changed our area? So you go to, I'm up in DC, man. You want to talk about an unchurched area, right? Like, good luck finding a church up there. But you and I live here in the Bible Belt, right? Yeah. And yet, where's the real impact? And that's something that I've always, personally, I'm just like, I've struggled with that. Like, how do we have these massively big churches and tens of thousands of people going to these churches on a weekend, and yet our communities, we're seeing no impact outside of those walls? And I think that's a reality that our churches need to face and tackle. And if we can answer that and actually go impact our communities in a way that we then become attractive to our communities, and then not only will we grow more, but we'll start to change some of these things.
That's so good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the $1 million question, man. I mean, like, kind of getting in there. And again, I think a lot of it's driven by the ego aspect and wanting, like, even inside of consulting and stuff that I'm doing with guys, one of my big pushes is, look, after our time together, it's not that I don't want to work with you. It's that I want you to be so well equipped in that time that you don't need me anymore.
Right.
And so, like, we've got to switch the way that we see things. Like, some people love being the savior, or they think that they are, right? So they create environments where people need them. And it's like at the church, a lot of times, like, oh, you have to come here. And it's like, how about we create so much value and we're impacting in so many levels that people want to be a part of the movement because of the spirit behind it all that we do.
Right.
It's a simple shift in that, but it's hard, right? For somebody to truly lead that.
That's right. That's right. No, it is. It's hard to not be needed. It's hard to mentor somebody to the point where they replace you. That's a big insecurity challenge. But you just going back to the church thing. I think something that churches could do. Listen, government offices, whether it be a state representative, state senator, or congressman, they get calls all day from people in their district that need help, and they're seeking government to help them. How many churches have called their local state reps office or senator and said, hey, when y'all get these types of calls, we can help them with that. Have them call us at this number. How many state reps have a database of churches who have programs that can help people in need in their community? So instead of somebody in need calling their state senator for help, why aren't they calling First Baptist or First Presbyterian or Gateway or whatever, right? Yeah. Like, I think if we could start partnering with our elected officials and our churches so that they're shifting that burden over to the churches, I think that's a real easy, quick, local step we could do. Right?
What kind of things are you talking about? Because I hear what you're saying. That sounds great. But like, what kind of calls are you getting? I think a lot of the confusion is the mystery behind what's actually happening. For most people that are completely layman to this.
Right, sure. We get the craziest calls in offices. So this is something I'm actually talking about, working with several other elected offices to do this, by the way. So this isn't like,
I love it, dude. It's cool.
But look, we get calls like, what we call casework, where people need help with the VA or the IRS. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about people who will call us because, they're unemployed, they're 80 years old, can't get out of their house. The storm came by last night and the trees fell and she can't get out of her driveway, whatever. I mean,
you get those calls?
Absolutely they do, because they want us to send somebody from the government. In that case would be the city, right? But they'll still call their state rep or their congressman, okay? They want us to send somebody from the government to go help them, because who else are they going to call? Okay? So whether it be a city councilman like Bobby Lindemood getting the call, or whether it be a congressman like Lance Gooden getting the call, all these government offices get calls for, outreach / welfare type calls. Okay.
Interesting.
You get calls. What about, relationship violence? You get calls from people that are in abusive situations, et cetera. You have everything from, You name it. Okay. I'm not talking about people that need help with an agency. I'm talking about people that need help in their personal life who call state agencies because they don't know any better, Corey, because they don't have a relationship with the church.
I mean, maybe the churches don't know this too, but like you telling me this is complete and utter news to me. I didn't even know that was a thing. So,
it's a thing. It's a
yeah.
thing.
Well, I mean, to think that people would even think that's the rational option, I mean, like that's almost like doesn't compute, I guess. So,
right.
But that makes a ton of sense. So, I mean, yeah. So you guys are getting those calls, and you're putting all this together. Kind of, what steps are you taking, and how could we help even?
Well, so I'm starting with our we're so to back up. We've been in office now for 2.5 months. We're getting everything up. That is on our outreach plan. So we're setting up an advisory, a spiritual advisory committee, which we're basically taking a bunch of pastors in our district, and we're going to have a roundtable with these pastors. Okay. And it's going to serve a couple things. One is to give us advice on legislation and things that are going on in DC. But then one of the things I've done in our questionnaire that we're setting up for these pastors is, how can your church help serve the community? What kind of calls can we send to you and your church? What services, what help, what counseling, whatever can you provide so that when we get these calls, we know which church to send them to? The Lutheran church might do this and the Baptist church might do that or whatever. But we need to know what they can do. And it's funny because you should see like when I ask pastors these questions, they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Like it's so like just the question makes them go, what are we doing? And why aren't we? Right. And
I love it, man.
I think if we can get all of a sudden 20, 30 different elected officials from city council to Congress, like thinking like this and setting up their office and communicating with pastors, you can start seeing a shift there just in helping the community.
Dude, remind me after this, let's talk about something, because I've got a connection for a potential software that could be a good kind of hub for all of that. Like a buddy of mine developed, and it's a communication software. But anyway, I think it could be an interesting way to scale this thing.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I know you, are you good on time for a second, or how long?
I've got about another 20 minutes here.
Okay, cool. So going back to the Democrats and all those like kind of coming out for the election and all this, and I mean some of the crazy stuff that we're hearing, like lowering the voting age to 16 years old, getting rid of the Electoral College, is all of this stuff, and I mean many money, the attack on the guns and all the different things that we have. Is all of this just a bunch of attention getting tactics, or do you really feel like there's a potential threat for this stuff?
I think we should take all of it serious. I think there is a potential threat for a lot of different reasons, one of which we live in a society that's horribly uneducated about civics and about basic government. And the vast majority of Americans think we live in a democracy and don't even know we live in a republic. So a lot of these attacks are related to the belief that we're a democracy. Yeah. And I think we need to take them seriously. The Electoral College, thankfully, that requires a constitutional amendment. Good luck with that. Yeah. Some of these other things can be done through simple legislation. And thank goodness the Republicans, and there's a difference between Republicans and conservatives, but the Republicans still have the Senate and the presidency, so the House can pass whatever they want. It's DOA. But let's talk about why. You just mentioned, I don't know, 7 or 8 things. All of them narratives that Democrats are putting forward.
Right.
But the question I have for you is, what's our alternative? I mean, look, we love to rail about Obamacare. Obamacare was passed 11 years ago this year. The Republicans have yet to put up a counter proposal to Obamacare. Okay? Where there is no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
What's our vision? What's the Republican vision for America? The last time we've had anybody suggest a vision was Newt Gingrich's contract with America back in, what was that, 96? Okay? Most of these kids that are in this conversation, these millennials that are AOC supporters, weren't even born then. Right. I mean, give me a break. And so we're talking about a situation where they're driving the narrative, and we haven't even attempted to put out an alternative narrative. Right?
Yeah.
We being both conservatives and Republicans. In other words, the Republican Party hasn't put out one, but neither have conservatives. So they own the entire narrative. They own the entire space right now. What's the alternative to the Green New Deal? Right now, the only thing being talked about policy-wise is Green New Deal. Do you know what Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats' legislative priorities for this session are? No, nobody knows. Do you know what the Republican legislative priorities are? No, we have no idea. Well, you know what everybody knows is what AOC's is. It's the Green New Deal. And yet, as much as we like to make fun of it, by the way, if you read the Green New Deal, I suggest anybody the Inkling does. It's pretty short. Yeah. It's only about 6-7 pages long. It's not a bill. It's a resolution. It is essentially a progressive manifesto. Okay, it's a manifesto that we're killing the earth and we have these other problems. Yeah. Capitalism sucks, and this is what we're going to do about it. It's a anti-capitalistic manifesto. Where's our manifesto, Corey? Where's the person on our side leading the charge?
Could that be created by somebody who's not in the political landscape? I mean, or
it could. The challenge is just going to be, do you have a platform to put it out? Right.
Okay.
So that one in particular. So I'm bringing this up. I'm a little, but
no, I've read part of it. I haven't read the whole thing, but I read like the first part of it, and it was talking about that global warming is all man-made and all. I mean, obviously,
it's kind of the first page and a half or so are all these assumptions that are just hogwash.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, I'm working with some folks, and we're looking at coming out with an alternative with our greener New Deal. Okay. And I mean, look, I start with the premise that non-spiritually speaking here, just from the history of mankind, the best thing that's ever happened to mankind is fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll make the point really easily. If you go back to 1899 to 1799, did the quality of life and lifestyle change that much? No. Yeah. 1799 to 1699, did much change? No. 1699 to 1599, no. But from 1900 to 1999, we went from burning wood and riding horses to being in space and iPhones.
Yeah.
Okay. Like everything changed.
And everybody in the United States having the capacity to own the iPhone.
Own those things? Correct.
Yeah. Because the vehicles that transport and everything.
That's right. You mean to tell me that wealth went up? So we had wealth generation. We had computers, the internet. I mean, all those things happened in 100 years. What was the single item that made all those things possible? Fossil fuel. Oh. None of the technological advances that happened from 1900 to 2000 happened without fossil fuels. And so fossil fuels are the single best thing that's happened to mankind. Here come these leftist progressives, and they want to go to war against fossil fuels and bring back trains, by the way, which are an 1800, 19th century technology. But anyhow, it's absolutely ludicrous. But yet, who on our side has put forth a vision for what our statement is? I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, and we know that where there is no vision, people perish.
Yeah. Conservatives
are perishing politically right now, not because they outnumber us, but because there is no vision on our side. We can say what we want about Nancy Pelosi, but the thing about Nancy Pelosi is she stands up, gives her side a rallying cry, and she runs the ball right up the middle and just down your throat.
Yeah, because she's been in it for so dang long.
She's been in it for so dang long, but she is a strong. Listen, I think the gal's crazy.
Yeah,
but
she is.
You can't deny that she's a strong leader who just says, "Hey, we're coming right up the middle, guys. Get ready. We're not passing. We're running it right up the middle." And she gives it to him, and she runs it right up the middle. And our side goes, "Huh? What are we going to do about this? We don't have strong." I mean, she's a woman. Where's the strong men on our side to say, you know what? We're going to punch you in the nose, and we're going to take the ball back, and we're going to run it right up the middle, and we're going to score a touchdown.
Yeah. So do you think that I mean, I guess in DC, there's this whole thing with supposedly with how, like decorum and all of this kind of stuff. It doesn't seem like that even exists anymore. No. But it reminds me of how during the Revolutionary War, here the British were fighting against the Continental Army, and the Continental Army is using guerrilla warfare on these like guys who are going to just go line up and shoot each other in rows. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm watching this happen, and it's like, guys, get guerrilla warfare on this. I mean, and I know it's happening, but it just seems that way from this side of of what's going on.
Yeah,
Based on what you just said too.
They definitely play. There's a great book called Confrontational Politics. If anybody wants to pick up a good book, it's a great little read. And in this book, he talks about how the problem with conservatives, we have Judeo-Christian values, and so we're taught to be polite, yes ma'am, no ma'am. We're taught to turn the other cheek. The other guys don't have Judeo-Christian values, so they spit, they punch, they kick you in the shins, they lie, they don't care. So we're playing by a whole different set of rules than they are. We're playing by rules. They don't have any rules, and then we're wondering why we're losing. Yeah. I always say, the minute you play by the other guy's rules, you lose, right? And we're playing by a set of rules that don't even apply anymore, and they're not playing by rules. So they have no rules, and we're playing by some other guy's set of rules, and then we wonder why we lose.
So we need to create our own rules, or what's the?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we lose our morals. What I am suggesting is that we engage in some guerrilla warfare. What I am suggesting is that we say, standing out here in this field in a straight line because of decorum, it ain't working, buddy. Okay. What I am suggesting is we reconsider the rules. So going back to my political career, you introduced me as being abrasive and this and that, and I gladly am. And I get this comment a lot, Corey. People go, Aaron, I like what you do. I just don't like your tactics. And I say, but those are the tactics that are required. You like what I do because I have results. I have scalps on the wall. I actually get stuff done, but I do it in a way that it may be abrasive, it might be brash, but it's never immoral. I never cross certain lines, but I do it in a very abrasive, aggressive manner. I think outside the rules. Yeah. If I'm going after an elected official, I'm not going to play by his or her rules because they're better at those rules than I am. Yeah. I'm going to create a new set of rules. Does that make sense?
I love that, man. Yeah, no, and that's one of the things I've always loved and respected about you, man. It's that it is that, like, you, and I get that a lot too, because I probably could be even less brash about some things that I do, but it ends up being that a lot of people live vicariously through us, to go out there and handle the dirty work that they don't want to do.
Right.
And I would never put my my ethics on the line or anything like that. But at the end of the day, stuff's got to get done and stuff needs to be talked about. We need to be having these conversations, and no matter how deep we want to bury our head in the sand, it doesn't make them go away. So
right.
We got to make that impact. But dude, this was amazing. Like, I love this conversation. I definitely want to have you back on. And actually, I'll just say this, like, as far as putting together some kind of a vision, I would love to continue that conversation with you more personally, because I'd love to be a part of helping any way that I possibly can in that, and I think that I agree with you. I think that's extremely important, and having, even if it's just a matter of making introductions or, helping to kind of idealize on those things, that's something I'd love to do, and I'd be happy to do it and love to be a part of in any capacity. So you just let me know, and dude, we'll just keep that conversation going. Anyway, I think
absolutely love to have your input.
As far as how people can get in touch with you, or you're not like super active, it seems like, on social media lately. You gotta be the nice guy, I guess. So.
Yeah, no, I am on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook, it's just Aaron Harris. Twitter, it's Aaron H125 is my handle, and it's Aaron. I still keep my Direct Action Texas. It's the easiest one to give out. It's Aaron at Direct Action Texas TX. Aaron at directactiontx.com. Easy way to email me if you want to do that. It's just, of course, you can always, here's the boring one, right? Aaron at mail.house.gov, but don't email me there.
So in regard to that, I know a lot of people may not be from your district and all that, but for them to reach out to you in regard to political things, a lot of people, I think, have this like desire to not reach out because they feel like it's imposing or something like that. What are your thoughts on that, real quick?
No, look, I think we started off by we talked about earlier about everybody needs to be involved, because you might not care about politics. Politics cares about you. Yeah. And I think, most people are going to sit there and go, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to get involved, et cetera. And I think you have to reach out to people who have been involved or who are involved. for me, I think I'm the very few people that work on the Hill started off as activists, right? Most of them went to college and then started on the Hill as an intern and they're just bureaucrats and they know how to work the Hill, but they don't understand the grassroots. They don't understand what's going on back in the district, right? So I think what's unique about me is I came from an activist, just a true believer, and then worked my way through the campaigns and then now on the Hill. So I think it brings a unique perspective where I can kind of see where people are at and kind of give them some advice on where to plug in. You know, my advice is always figure out what you're really passionate about and like be an expert in that area of politics. There's so much to do in politics, from transportation to education to medical to, you know, you name it, civil liberties to religious liberties, that you can't be a jack of all trades because you do become a master of none. If you're a master of none, your ability to influence is minimized in politics. So what I would suggest is find an area, specialize in that. And it may not necessarily be topical. I'll give you an easy example. The most pivotal hub layer of government is your county government. The county interacts with your state, federal, and local funding in a way that no other level of government does.
Okay.
And yet there are no activists in Tarrant County or Dallas County that watch and hold the county commissioners accountable. So if you're in Tarrant County or Dallas County, heck, Denton County and Collin County as well, happy to talk to you about it, but your county government is an easy place for you to start, and you can become a subject matter expert on that in no time, because the definition of a subject matter expert is anybody that knows more about that subject than you do.
Yeah.
And there's nobody watching the county government. So you get involved in that and start explaining to people what's going on at the county level, you'll automatically be the expert, you know? So
wow.
That's just an example, right? If somebody comes, I tell people that all the time when they come to me and ask me, how can I get involved? It's like, go to the county, become the county expert, because nobody's doing it. And yet it affects every layer of our government because it runs through the county.
And for you guys listening, this is the best way for you to make impact, like right out of the gate. It's not that hard to get plugged into politics. And I was relatively surprised when I first got involved, and it was during an election year, but I started going to these meetings, and like the guy who's now Dan Patrick, lieutenant governor for the state of Texas. I mean, I was in rooms where there was 5 other people and he's there, and I'll be like, that's one of the most powerful dudes in the state of Texas. And you're in that close proximity. That doesn't always happen, especially when they're incumbent, but it's not that hard to get in and get known and start getting in the right circles and all that.
Right.
So just to take away some of that pain. Well, Aaron, dude, I know you got to go. Thanks again for taking that little bit of extra time. Thank you so much for being wide open, and appreciate you, man. Love you, brother. And anything that I can do, I'd love to be a part of that conversation. Maybe we can. How long are you in town for?
I fly back to DC Sunday night, but I'll be here a lot of April. So let's try to grab coffee in April.
Yeah, let's do it, man. I love that. All right, guys, y'all have a great day. Go out, make an impact. Aaron, bless you, brother.
Thanks,
talk
Mark.
to y'all later.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
See you.